Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Cybersecurity for 2021 and Beyond. Before we get started here, just want to lay out some ground rules. We are looking for participation, so please feel free to ask questions at any time via the chat function. I will be presenting, but we also have Nicholas Paulukow here joining us today. He's our CEO and visionary. He will be handling the chat, so he will be able to ensure that questions are captured and let me know in the event that we have any questions so we can address those. I am Corominas. I am the sales and marketing manager here with One-to-One. And what we do is we consult, manage, and implement technology solutions. We offer a variety of IT solutions, including security solutions, co-managed and managed services, and professional IT services as well. And why we exist is to educate and empower those we serve. So we want to educate and empower those that we serve so that they can make informed decisions about their technology and utilize that technology to grow their business. Our core values, these are our fundamental beliefs here at One-to-One, and they inform our day-to-day behavior. Leading with a moral compass, that's to do the right thing, even when it's not easy or no one is watching. Being servant-minded, we want to serve others without expecting anything in return. We approach every situation with a how can I help you attitude. Putting we before me, our team is willing to put others first. The common good matters more than personal gain. And going beyond the status quo, our team strives for excellence. We pursue constant improvement of ourselves, our company, and our clients. So before we get into the content here, we want to make sure that we can help you. We want the session to add value to you. So we'd like to ask, what is one thing you want to get out of this presentation? You can feel free to let us know in the chat. Nick will capture that, make sure we are ready for it. So I'll give you a couple seconds here. Okay. So we have our objectives here. What do I really need to monitor? How many businesses do you see that do not have an incident response plan? And what is the latest threat facing personal and businesses? So I guess that would mean individual or personal users as well as businesses. So with that, we'll get started. So we'll take a look at the problem. What is cybersecurity? So cybersecurity, from a definition standpoint, is the art of protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access or criminal use, and the practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. And the problem as it relates to cybersecurity is that any and all businesses are at risk of an attack. It's not just large enterprise organizations. And the data that we've collected in advance of the session shows that the bulk of the group or all of the group is taking a reactive approach to a cybersecurity threat that requires a proactive approach to address and solve. Some statistics about cybersecurity. 86% of small to medium businesses, or SMBs, report improved cybersecurity as a top 5 priority for their business. So it is a top of mind area for the majority of small to medium businesses. And 80% of United States small and medium businesses feel that they might fall victim to a cyber attack in the next 6 months. So a lot of organizations are very conscious right now about the fact that they have cybersecurity risk and they know they need to address cybersecurity risk. Average loss amount per business email compromise scam, $75,000. BEC, or business email compromise, is compromise of a legitimate business or email account for the purpose of defrauding the company, customers, partners, or employees into conducting unauthorized financial transactions, just so you know what BEC really means or what it is. And estimated BEC losses last year were $1.77 billion. That makes up 50% of all cybercrime losses, and that is from the FBI Internet Crime Report. If you're interested in seeing more about that, you can hop on Google and go ahead and take a look. So why do hackers target SMBs? Well, we have a video that's going to show you. So we'll actually break down a little bit. You'll get to see how an attacker goes about engineering a cyber attack.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. If that's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicard, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep. Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't.
Are you on your way into the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
It's Karen in HR. Our benefits dashboard is really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Can you call and get this?
Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main.
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. You pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know to
Just
help?
pay it. Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicard is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed lower today, led by Qualicard, which was down 14% on news that their recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell
acknowledged.
to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
So what this video really shows is the way an individual user can impact a cybersecurity incident, and also that sometimes the solution can be more social engineering oriented rather than even some type of sophisticated cyber attack from a technology standpoint. Take a look at some additional cybersecurity stats here. 70% of breaches were caused by outside actors. 86% had a financial motivation behind them. 43% were on web applications, which is double what it was the year prior, so it's a growing segment. And 27% of malware incidents can be attributed to ransomware. Source of that is the Verizon DVIR. Some additional stats from the DVIR. 48% of organizations do not have an efficient incident response plan in place. 59% did not cite any legal or regulatory requirements, even though they exist throughout the United States and they really need to be accounted for. 43% do not fully designate who the incident response stakeholders are. And then 71% actually do not have documented descriptions of security training for end users. Some of the challenges SMBs face with cybersecurity, often they approach it thinking they're too small. They assume it only happens to enterprise orgs, even though SMBs often are more likely targets. Believe it's expensive. They don't want to address it with money. They're trying to use free solutions instead of proven solutions or a unified set of tools that all work together. It's inconvenient for them. They believe that they do not need business class hardware and solutions. They want flexibility. They want to use inexpensive or unrestricted resources. And again, I mentioned before the benefits of proven solutions and unified tools. Or they just have blind trust. They believe their IT team, their basic firewall and AV solutions have them covered, and they don't really have a process or a plan or any type of way to validate and assess their cybersecurity posture and ensure that their team really does have them covered. So we'll also look at local impacts, show some examples here in Pennsylvania and in our region here in the Harrisburg, Lancaster area, and just show how these type of incidents are happening in our backyard on a regular basis. Here you see the Harrisburg region ranked 5th most prone to small business cyber attacks, average of 195 cyber attack victims for every 100,000 people. And you can just see this region via a report from a cybersecurity company shows that it's one of the most vulnerable areas for small businesses in terms of cyber attacks and their vulnerability. Just an example here outside of our region, but still in Pennsylvania, Luzerne County suffering a computer network attack where damages topped $600,000. A local borough, Duncannon, having to pay $43,000 to re-access their data after hackers took control of their servers. Here in Lancaster, the Strasburg Railroad losing $80,000 from a cyber attack and actually not discovering it until their employees noticed some strange activity with their files and on their network. And then more recently, this is actually back in late February, Millersville University had a cyber attack on their network. They lost several services and they actually had to cancel both virtual and in-person classes for a day. And at this point, they're still investigating the full nature and cause of the attack. So what do all these events have in common? Well, all financially motivated with an average loss amount of $241,000, all caused by outside actors, all actually failed to detect that they had a threat and an incident until it was too late to do anything about it, and all seem to not have a clear response plan other than to pay. So what could they have done better? They could have identified the threat actor before the event occurred and identified what their threats were. They could have had adequate protection in place to stop the attack. They could have detected the risk, had a response plan to respond to the incident, and then had a recovery plan to recover their data other than just paying a ransom. So they took a reactive approach, and we'll show why a reactive approach is an issue. So here's a 10-day sample size in early February of threats. What you can see here, a variety of different platforms, everything from Android devices to Apple, to Microsoft, Cisco. And it really shows that no product or vendor is immune, no service is immune. Threats are broad. They encompass a variety of platforms and really a variety of services and providers. And you even see Linux here, a web browser, Chrome, a Wi-Fi chip and module. So constantly across a variety of platforms, variety of services, variety of providers, there are threats everywhere. To summarize, threats are constant and they're constantly evolving. And because of that, you need a proactive approach to address threats and your cybersecurity. So in conclusion, what does this show us? Well, identification is key. You need to know what your threats are. You need to know your potential risk. Once you've identified, you can protect. You can then protect against those threats. Many attacks result from simple things like non-patched systems. Once you've identified those threats, you can also detect them. Detecting an event prior to becoming a recovery solution is key. You can respond to those threats. Know and practice your response plan. Know who your response agent is. And then recovery. If you do all the other things in front of recovering properly, you won't get here. But in the event you do get here, having a good recovery plan in place, ensuring you practice that plan will be key to getting your system back up and running. So why should you care? Well, Nick is going to take over here and he will actually go over why you should care about cybersecurity, about your risk level, and about your data potentially being compromised.
All right, Lou, thank you for that. So let's get into some of the responsibilities. So now that we kind of have the back history of kind of what cybersecurity is, we're going to get into the meat of cybersecurity in general, and then also review some of your data that each of you have presented in a confidential format. So as we move forward, what you're going to see is there is some definite regulations in the industry. And if Lou, you could provide me that information. So the regulations are clearly in Pennsylvania as well as in other states and in the EU. And we're going to just break them down briefly. So I'm going to go over the PA breach notification next. And basically what this really means is that we're all responsible for any sort of breach. And it can be as basic as information that we store for every employee that we have on our staff. So for example, a Social Security, a driver's license, a credit card, any personal information that we store from our employees, we are bound to notify of a breach if it was a physical loss of paper to electronic loss of their data. And there is strict guidelines on how we have to report if we have lost any of that data. And you're going to see there is a site called mints.com. It's a third-party organization that shows the breakdown of guidelines in each of the states and what you're required to do. That's also something that we can help you with should you get into this scenario. But the goal of cybersecurity and education today is to try to avoid ever having to get to these guidelines. Now I'm going to move to an example of California. California is a very stringent state in general to operate in, but they produce a guideline called CCPA, and it's the California Consumer Privacy Act. And they really get stringent on any loss or protection of data all the way down to your end user. So if you are a retail organization or you're collecting client information and their first or last name in your general database, they have a very specific guideline on how to report a breach or what you're responsible to do to protect their data in your organization. So same thing, go to mints.com and you can get the full report on their Privacy Act. If we move into the EU at a very high level, so if you're doing business in the EU has what's called GDPR, and it's starting to work into the United States into a standard. So the federal government is working to make this a general standard, and it is also one of the toughest privacy laws that has been enacted, and also has harsh fines defined for violators. So if you are operating in the EU currently, I would advise you to understand the GDPR and understand, are you protecting the data and the data of your client's information under these guidelines. So moving into summarizing this section, just remember, it's about identifying. Start to understand what's required in the areas that you operate. So what states, counties, all have different guidelines. Protecting that data is an approach of understanding. This is key, is education. So understand what the requirements are. And then hire professionals so that understand how to detect. This is generally the area where most people that have internal staff struggle with, because they're not experts in cybersecurity. They're generally great at response and recovery. And what we consider more of the firefighter mentality. They handle putting the fires out each day, but you require some level of detection. We use an example sometimes is you might have an in-house controller, and that controller is responsible for the day-to-day activities of the company's books and financials. However, at the end of the day, you generally hire a professional to handle your taxes because they understand the current guidelines and regulations. Same thing in this detection phase. So let's talk about what do you need to know. And we're going to educate you on what's called the gold standard. So this gold standard is based on what we call the NIST 800-53. And all of you that completed your assessment today, I'll get into more detail, you completed an entry-level NIST assessment. Now, it is key to follow a standard. We are not making these things up. This is a guideline that has been created and has been mandated on how to handle cybersecurity. So for a couple minutes, we're going to teach you on that so you understand the key components of NIST and how you can start to educate yourself. So key areas of the framework is key here. So there is different phases and there is different attributes to this framework, and we're going to briefly teach you about them today. So the goal of the framework is to have common language. This is not IT language. This is language relative to running your business. It's adaptable to each business and any type of business. It is risk-based. So the goal of this is to manage and mitigate any risk. And it's based on an international standard. So this standard that we're going to teach you in this framework is across an international format and is already adopted internationally. And it's a living document. This is not a once and done type of process. This is a guide and a maturity level. Each of you are going to be at a different maturity level, and you need to continue to mature through these stages in the process. So let's break down the different functions of the framework. So the first function is identify. The second is protect, detect, respond, and recover. Now, you'll understand that the beginning portion of our phases that we've been educating you, we've been using the same language so you can start to connect it. But identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Now, let's break them down just a little bit so that you understand them. So identifying is understanding the potential risk in your business and to develop a strategy around it. Let me say that one more time. It's to identify the potential risk or your cyber risk and develop a strategy around it. Protecting it is taking appropriate action or precautions to prevent something from happening, okay? So protecting is to prevent it from happening. And detection is an area at which is helping you protect, because if you don't understand what you're protecting, then you're gonna unable to respond from it. So you need to detect it by monitoring and understanding what you're detecting to be able to protect from it. Most times this is where areas of people struggle because they think virus scan or some tool that they run is detecting a problem. In the world of leading and lagging indicators, virus scan is a lagging indicator. It has already happened. So you didn't identify it or protect from it. You are just responding because it has decided that there is a problem, but the problem already happened. So we want to identify what is our risk. We want to protect from it by putting things into place to protect us or lock that front door. And then we need to create tools and systems to actually detect what that risk is. And then how do we respond should we detect an issue? So this is procedures, process, resources, such as maybe IT staff or outside services. And then at the end of the day, we want to avoid this, but we understand that it could happen. We need to recover. And recover is not just restore a file or restore system. It's also about how do we recover from a PR situation? How do we recover our systems and get them up and running? How do we do recon to understand why did we not detect it or protect from it? So this is not the technical recover. We do have to recover in a technical format, but there's a lot of operational or strategic leadership items that we need to consider. So now that you understand the framework a little bit, we want to give you an understanding of what an incident response lifecycle looks like. And really most of this is about preparing and planning is the key. And then in the middle of that is putting all the systems into play. So this slide I really like. The preparation and planning and post-incident activity, that blue line, is really what I consider the leadership should be doing. And in the middle, that is your IT department, that is your third-party vendors detecting, analyzing, and trying to recover if there needs to be an event. But what's really key to cybersecurity, this is not an IT-driven process. This is a leadership-driven process to prepare the plan and how we're going to respond to it, and then put the appropriate detection and response agents into play. All right, so moving forward a little bit, just to give you an understanding that there is an extensive amount of framework controls, and there is currently over 100, about 124 currently. And although we're not going to go over them today, we want you to understand that it is highly documented, and we're more than happy to walk you through those categories. They continue to expand. So even from the time of this slide, you see that there's 108 subcategories. We're already up to 124. So this is a journey. It continues to evolve, and we need to continually educate ourselves. So let's just summarize this section. What does this show? Well, one, identify that we are using a gold standard to help you through this process. Protect, yourself by using the functions in this process correctly. And we want you to detect the outcomes of the controls. So the controls that we're going to talk about, that's the detection areas, and we want you to be able to put those into action. And then educate your responders. So, right, how do we want to respond and recover from a solution or an issue, rather? All right, so let's get into the meat of the presentation where people get the most excited. We're going to show you the data based on the NIST framework today of the people that are participating or attendees. Now, no names will be shown, but we want to show you the data and how each of you benchmark against each other at a very high level. So let's look at this real quick. So you completed the NIST entry assessment. It measures your overall cyber risk. That's the key today. The data is organized by function, which you just learned. And we're going to review only critical, high, and medium risk items. There is low risk items. We're not going to go over them today. So let's get started. So today we have people in our group that are packaging, service distribution organizations, contractors, digital sign company, advertising, electrical distribution, private and public manufacturers, medical and construction manufacturers. It looks like many are from a couple million to a couple 100 million from the data that we presented. And what you're going to see through this is most of you are struggling and all of you have critical or high needs. So no one is immune. Some are more mature than others, and that's okay. That is just the journey at which this process goes through. So let's break it down a little bit more so we can digest it. Remember, I gave you that framework in regards to identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover. And the highest critical areas of everyone on the call today is on how to protect themselves. The second is how to identify. Now, most of you answer fairly well in the self-assessment for recovery and respond, and that is probably because you potentially already have an IT team that their whole life has been spent on how do I recover and how do I respond. So that makes sense from the data that we saw. And the third area is detection. So we're going to concentrate on the protect area today, and we're going to give you some education on that. But why don't we show you kind of where that breaks down from critical and high. So in regards to this area, our critical areas are in protect, identify, and they're broken out on the most critical is how to protect. Most of you are in the protect area of critical issues. The high issues are identify, and the medium issues, yet again, are protect. So identify and protect are the key areas that we're going to discuss and give you some solutions on today. So regrouping again, the framework that we're going over is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Most of you have a good handle or feel that you have a good handle on respond and recover. But the top three areas, identify, protect, and detect, is where we see the most improvement. So let's go over and dig into that a little more. So the top areas we summarized here for you just as some actionable items to write down or take away. But the top critical item or control for everyone that's on the call is security awareness training, dark web monitoring, and procedures and policies. Now, some of you say that you're doing security awareness on hiring and onboarding. Relative to security and cybersecurity, it's all about identifying, protecting, and detecting. And that means these systems have to be automated, not run manually by maybe your HR department. So security awareness training is an automated system that will be deployed and sends phishing emails and attempts to your employees to see how security aware they are and continues to train the people that are lower on the leaderboard and allows you to integrate that in with your HR performance process. Dark web monitoring is what credentials are out there for my key people. That's an astounding report when we run it for people that shows what credentials, and we know what passwords, and we can show you. So we can start to protect or identify some areas of risk. And then procedures and policies are key. It's great that we might have all these tools in place, but how do we respond? What do we do when we terminate an employee? How long does it take to respond to an issue that we have? Our other area of high is in the identify area, and we call it a SIM solution. It's basically a unit that allows you to aggregate all the IT systems that you have, identify threats, and have a third party report that back to you, that a threat has been identified so we can respond and shut that threat down. The next top item is third-party IT management. Having an internal IT department is great. However, this control requires that you have a third party to audit and help manage and automate such things as patching, alerting, a lot of the response aspects, and helping you detect and identify issues. And lastly, there is some physical access to key data. Just remember, we're not talking about just digital data in cybersecurity. We're talking about physical data, where you store client data like your server equipment, where you store physical files. You do need to protect them in, protect those areas as well in the cyber framework here. Okay, let's move forward a little bit more here. So how do you measure up overall is kind of the summary. Most of you are in the response and recover mode, where I've already spoken about. Everyone's struggling with identifying and protecting, in the cyber framework. This indicates more of a reactive posture. You're reacting to situations. Most of you are not proactively addressing cybersecurity at the current moment. From the data, that's what the data shows. So how do we proactively move into a proactive approach? So let's go over a couple key takeaways that would be helpful for you. Is automate your IT process with third-party patching, monitoring, and updates of your system. create a security awareness culture through that security awareness software that we talked about, implement third-party detection and response tools. This is not virus scan. This is utilizing what is called EDR, which is a specific tool to detect items prior to it being an issue. And keep your IT team focused on response and build a process of procedures around this NIST framework. So a lot of you are working diligently through trying to secure your environment. However, the framework is identifying that you're taking that reactive approach. So we're trying to switch you to more of a proactive. These are a couple key takeaways from the data of the reports of each of you that completed your assessment. There is a plethora of different processes and things that need to go into play, but these are kind of 6 key ways to start moving into a proactive approach. All right, so to keep us on track with time, let's just talk about how do we go about solving this. So we talked a little bit about a NIST framework, a gold standard. We talked about moving away from a reactive to more of a proactive solution. And let's talk about how we, at a high level, work to solve these issues. All right, so number 1, review your NIST assessment. Some of you are going to say, well, I don't have it. We're going to tell you how to go about gathering that. Categorize your risk. So yet again, remember, part of the framework is identify what your risk is. So we need to categorize each and individual risk based upon each of your environments. And then third is develop a plan to manage that risk. And then fourth is to assess your team and their capabilities. What is your team capable of doing, and what do you require to outsource, just like outsourcing your accounting services or your taxes? And then create a budget. So remember, most times people are reacting to these solutions. The people that we showed you that were impacted by cyber risk ended up paying money. We're trying to avoid that. So let's create a budget around how to protect ourselves. And then we're going to implement those solutions. So put into place some action in our plan. And then what we're going to have to constantly be doing is reassessing our progress. This is not a once and done. So we need to make changes. Then we need to reassess it on a quarterly and annual basis to understand, are we improving and staying ahead of these cyber threats for the organization. To change it up a little bit, to show you in another format, these are the critical and high risk areas. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this just, you can take a screenshot of this. This kind of lists the areas in the framework and then the top priorities. So yet again, security awareness was number 1, getting your people trained. The biggest threat was the people in most of your reports, and then putting in detection and response software or solutions, and then third-party IT management and proper hardware like content filtering or firewall devices to protect yourself. All right, so let's give you some tools and takeaways, because we said that we would give you some actionable things that you can take away. There's a document, if you would like to have it, that we're more than happy to send you, that shows you our cyber security 20 ways journey. So we take that 120 pieces of the framework and we break it down to 20 digestible action items, and we can walk you through that. So if any of you would like that, send us a chat or send us an email and we'll send it to you after the event. The next thing is really a high overview of how to handle a cyber attack. So number 1 is incident process ownership and general guidelines. That is really defining your procedure and how to respond to a cyber attack. Any of you that have cyber insurance, they are going to require that you follow a process to actually self-contain the event, or they may not cover your cyber event. So there is some processes and procedures that you want to be aware of prior to actually having to deal with this. And then, identification of the actual cyber event. Where is it at? How do I contain it? How do I remediate from it? Is there a recovery that I need to work through? And then debriefing is key. Remember, if an event has happened and we have to get to recovery, we need to debrief and understand where we failed in our process. And we need to kind of fill or solve those holes so that we're not back at the same situation. And also our insurance companies will require that because they'll go through an audit as well. You can take a screenshot of this. These are all vendors. Every vendor that you use posts current and active cyber events on their products and services, and they will tell you current risks that are happening at the current moment in their product. Now, if you're engaging with a third party, such as one-to-one, we are actually monitoring that through our technologies in an automated fashion, and we'll manage your risk for you. But if you have an internal department, those are key areas to pay attention to. So kind of wrapping up our presentation today, and I know that this is a lot of information, our intention was to kind of give you an understanding of the framework of what is a cyber framework. Understand what is the threat landscape now. All of you can hopefully see that this is in our backyard. It is not going away. And we need to protect our stakeholders, which is our customers and our business, from an event happening. It is not going away. So what we're willing to do as a next step action is to really help each of you individually. So you all had completed the self-assessment. And what we're willing to do is take a 30-minute personal call to go over your results personally, go over your high-risk areas, go over your critical areas, and we'll review your risks. We'll review gaps that you currently have that you self-identified. We'll create a very high-level plan for you at no cost, and then we'll give you a general budget of what it would cost to kind of start your cyber journey on removing those critical and high risks. So what we're really looking for you to do is chat us your company name right now and a date and time, and we will get in contact with you to schedule and review that with you. It is a no obligation. We just remember our key mission of our company is really to empower via education. So we want to empower you with some of that education and hope that you will start to learn this framework or engage with the appropriate people to learn this framework to better create a plan around strength around your cybersecurity journey. So in closing, let's review some of the questions that came about at the beginning part of this presentation, and let's see if we covered them or not. If not, I'll answer them right now. So what do we really need to monitor? Okay, so someone asked that. What really it is it's key that monitoring and alerting go together. So if you monitor something, that is great, but the alerting component as the event is happening, you need to monitor it and you need to alert on it, and then you need to, detect and respond to it. So this should not be a lagging type of thing. If you have a fire alarm in your building and the detection unit, the smoke detector detects smoke, it alerts a third party who then responds and calls the fire department. So what we're really saying is your IT department, unless they're 24/7, is really going to struggle with this, and the event is already going to happen. So for example, if the detection alarm went off, notified an internal staff member that the building's on fire, and they only get it the next day, that's not going to be helpful in recovery. So the monitoring key is key to detection and response immediately. So how many businesses do you see that do not have an incident response plan? Most people say they have an incident response plan, and it's very broad. It basically says, this is how we're going to respond, but it really doesn't have key action steps. And when we say a response plan, we say that a stress event is happening, and the response plan identifies who handles PR, who handles communication to employees, who handles communications to the client, who is fixing and getting us back up and running. It is a key response plan is action. what is happening. It is the document that we pull out. We do not have to think about it. We all just start to take action. Most people that we work with do not have that detailed of a plan. And it's generally the plan that they have is more to say that they have one, but it really is not one that's actionable. Hopefully that answers your question. And what is the latest threat facing personal and business? The remote landscape, because of COVID recently, of users going home and working and connecting into our enterprises is the biggest personal and business threat that we are seeing today. China and all other threat actors such as Russia, etc., the threat actors that we follow and we see on a daily basis only amplified their game during COVID because they realize that most people working remotely are not protected. So they figure it's their best time to take advantage of that. And so that's really key to having a third party that puts in tools in place to really help manage identifying, detecting, and responding to issues regardless of where the device is. And we're seeing that most people that we engage with do not have that plan in place. It is very reactive, or they don't have it in place at all for those remote connections. And everybody's sharing internet at home these days. And because of that, they connect in maybe via VPN into their business, and their child's computer might have an infection, and now that spreads into your business environment. That is generally not a great situation, but it's happening during this time of COVID. Without the proper tools in place, it can be a major risk. Hopefully that answered your question. We enjoyed doing this presentation today. We are very conscious about staying on time, so I think we have 1 minute left. We're more than happy to talk to any of you outside of this presentation. You can email either of us at any time. We would love to go over that your own personalized report. Many of the executive teams that we're meeting with on a daily basis are finding extreme value. The last company we met with was about $800 million in revenue, and the CEO said this was the most actionable data in 20 minutes that I could understand as a leadership member that was non-technical to help me understand how to move this critical problem or risk in my business. So we enjoy empowering through education. We hope that this presentation was helpful for each and every one of you. And we'll stay online for a couple minutes. If you want to put any questions in chat, we're more than happy to answer that for you. So I'm going to go silent for a minute, but we're going to pay attention to chat. And then if not, we're going to wrap up and appreciate your time today.